Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game So here I got another fun and exciting episode for you guys this evening because over the July 4th holiday weekend, a prototype for Out of the Vortex was dumped by the original developer from Cryo Interactive, and it was uploaded to the Hidden Palace for everyone to enjoy. And it's not that often that we get fully playable prototypes of games that never existed before, so that's definitely something to be celebrated and talked about. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. Now I had heard rumblings online some years ago of a prototype of this game potentially still being out there, and that was basically it. Not many people really knew this existed or was even in development. Now today you can play this game from start to finish, and while it does definitely have some bugs because it is not a finished game, you can see the credits scroll, so that is a ton of fun. And as far as the property this is based on, Out of the Vortex, it was a comic book. I am not a huge comic book fan, nothing against them, just don't really read them. So I'm just playing this from a straight prototype experience, knowing that it is based on that comic. So if you read it back in the day, leave me a comment down below and tell me if it was good or not. I kind of found some mixed reviews on Google search, but honestly, just not really my domain. What I absolutely do love and play all the time are beat 'em ups, whether they're arcade or console based. So getting a prototype for a new beat 'em up game is always to be celebrated. So it should be obvious off the top, but this definitely feels inspired by Streets of Rage and Streets of Rage 2 on the Sega Genesis. The moveset, the overall movement of the characters, the graphical style just reminds me of a Bizarro World Streets of Rage. And honestly, if you're going to make a beat 'em up based on a comic book property for the Sega Genesis, looking to Streets of Rage as inspiration is definitely the type of game that you do want to look at, because Streets of Rage 2 is definitely one of the best beat 'em ups of all time, and probably in my opinion the best beat 'em up on the Sega Genesis. So you can definitely hear and feel the inspiration here. Now if you do want to play this game, it will work on software emulation, it'll work on MiSTer FPGA and real hardware. But very often the soundtrack and the sound effects are going to hang and start playing a single tone in the background. Just seems like there's a bug in the build so that the music actually ends up halting on a certain note and it will just hang in the background. It won't be loud, so it's nothing you need to worry about scaring you or blowing your speakers. Just do be aware that if the music stops playing, that is to be expected. And I will say, once we get to stage 2 here, definitely a better, more inspired stage than stage 1. They start you out in a sewer, and I'm really not sure if that's for part of the storyline of the comic book or just what the developers went with, but I would say the visual stylings here and the overall police station aesthetic definitely do it a lot more for me than the sewer. And again, big Streets of Rage vibe here. So as far as the gameplay is concerned, you do need to be almost perfectly aligned with the opponent on screen to be able to actually strike them. So it does seem like this needed a little bit more time in the oven to get that gameplay perfect, but of course, being an unfinished prototype, it's not like it's a review, and it is totally playable. Every once in a while, you're just going to feel like you should be hitting an enemy and you're not going to be able to. And you'll see Barbed Wire here has a handgun that she can shoot off, and I'm not sure if there was supposed to be any sort of cooldown effect on that, because you can just repeatedly use it and basically stun lock the enemies if you get them in the right position. And you will see we take our first continue here, and you do get a menu to change the character you're using as well. There's 4 different characters in the game, obviously all based on the comic book, so you can kind of pick who you like and play the game with them, or you can move around from character to character. And if you've watched any of my beat 'em up videos, I always say it doesn't qualify as a true beat 'em up if there is not an elevator level, and Out of the Vortex here is going to have exactly that for you. You're going to have to fight on this elevator, and even though I've never seen an elevator look like this in real life, it is a good arena. But I've always wondered on these elevator levels, if the enemies are coming from the left and the right and there are walls there, where are they actually coming from within the game universe? It's not really anything we need to worry about, but it's always made me wonder where your opponents actually show up from. And this is a very long elevator. You're going to go up multiple floors, and elevators are always just kind of here to prolong the gameplay without having to design too many new areas. But I will say, as far as the graphics are concerned, I like the muted aesthetic to them. It definitely has a grimy sort of grungy look to it, and it does work. And when the soundtrack is functioning, I would say it's a B+ tier effort as well. So go ahead and listen for 45 seconds. I'll be back with a lot more of Out of the Vortex because it just came out. It's a fun soundtrack for sure, but it definitely doesn't elevate itself to Streets of Rage 2 levels, and you might notice when you listen, it seems to speed up and slow down ever so slightly, and I think that might be due to that hanging issue where the audio will just hang on one note. It seems like the audio in the game is definitely unfinished and can suffer from some bugs. Other playable characters have completely different movesets as well, and some of them feel a little bit less finalized than others. Barbware, I would say, is probably the character that seems to have their entire moveset in, where this character here, kind of flying around the screen, the entire heads-up display disappears when you use that move, and sometimes they can kind of get frozen for 3 to 4 seconds until you can gain control of them again. So it's definitely seeming like a situation where some characters were finalized and some were definitely still works in progress, but that is again totally fine for a prototype. We're here to see what could have been, and I would say if this game came out, it would have definitely been interesting, and I'm not sure how this happened. I do not know the comic book storyline, but I'm highly assuming Michael Jackson in his Moonwalker outfit was not in the comic book, but if I'm wrong, let me know down below. This is, I would say, the most bug stage of the entire prototype. The floor texture is incorrect, and these Michael Jacksons just keep coming towards us. I was very surprised when I saw this, but I was also highly amused, and that's the fun thing about going through prototypes. You get to see what was going on in the development cycle, and it's possible that those sprites were just kind of a placeholder, or maybe they actually intended to have Michael Jackson in there. And there are a whole host of boss fights as well, and interestingly, you can get a few hits on the boss as they walk onto the screen before you get these intercut story titles here. The story, I would say, doesn't really make too much sense. I'm sure you had to be a fan of the comic book to fully understand it, but you can jump in, play the game, start beating some opponents, and have a good time exploring a Sega Genesis game that never came out, even if you have no idea what's actually going on in the story. And you will see here I can definitely spam abuse this firearm as well, so I really do wonder if that was supposed to be a cooldown effect where you could only use it every couple seconds or maybe 3 times per life, but here in the prototype you can just absolutely continue to use it. So that's one of those things. It's always fun to kind of presume what could have been had a game like this been finished, but we have to just take a look at what is available here, and sometimes you'll see that boss sprite just slides across the screen with no animation whatsoever, so I'm assuming some of the animations for some of the characters are not complete yet. But the fun part is there's a lot of stages in this game, there's a lot of fun graphics, and it is just fun to check out. I would say that they don't progress the screen quick enough, and they just keep throwing enemies at you over and over again, so it feels like it definitely needed a little bit of balancing before it actually could have seen a release. And the question is, why was this cancelled? I really can't find a very good reason for it. It's unfortunate that it didn't make it out into store shelves, but there's so many canceled games on the Sega Genesis and every other platform, trying to find a reason why for all of them would take a lifetime and you still wouldn't be halfway through the work. But one more soundtrack sample just so you get a sense of what the game was going for aesthetically, and I'll be right back. Some decent tracks there, and you get a full story intro cut sequence when you actually start up the game, so you can tell that this was getting close to the home stretch. My guess would be another month or 2 of development, trying to get some of those bugs fixed, getting the audio in line, and maybe cleaning up the gameplay ever so slightly, and this would have been ready to print to cartridges, put in a case, and ship to stores. But obviously that is not what happened. Out of the Vortex never saw release, and for the longest time people knew of its existence but really hadn't seen much from it. Now, thanks to a developer at Cryo Interactive who was happy to dump the game and send it to Hidden Palace, you were able to play it today, and that is always something amazing. When a game you never thought you'd get a chance to check out ends up showing up, you can download it, you can play it, and you can enjoy it, because I always advocate for things like this, the preservation of prototypes, and everyone being able to play them and enjoy them. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and if you read the comic, let me know what it's about. Short of that, we are done. Go play the game, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.